Hello there, and welcome back to Humanity First. I apologize, I know the lighting isn't great. Also, the background isn't really great. Um, I have been intending on moving things around to hopefully have a more presentable view for videos, but that's what we'll have to work with for now, and I think it's okay. This is a bit out of the ordinary. I would have usually tried to have a video out for tomorrow, but there a lot has happened, and I think it's good to just spend today as well talking about some of the developments that have taken place and yeah, what they mean for us moving forward, really. Um, so, and particularly, I guess I wanted to talk about two things, neither of which are very good. Um, the first has to do with a unfolding battle of sorts where you're having these companies that are all competing for market share. They're all essentially like their businesses, AI development, and they're developing their models and using these models, serving them, using an API for other people to use them, and then also using their own models internally to produce products that use their models and sell those products as well. And so the big players there, we all know it's OpenAI, it's Anthropic, it's Google, specifically Google DeepMind, which is sort of like the group that Google acquired that really specializes in AI research. That's the group that's headed by Demis Hassabis, and with them they have like Google Research, which is like another group also under Google that's working closely on Gemini, and it's XAI, and those really at the moment are the big players in the US, and they are in the lead, and they're all competing with each other. Probably, if you were to poll most people at the moment, it seems like OpenAI and Anthropic are in the lead, but Google is probably going to release something soon, and they're all kind of like still in the race. They all have comparative advantages against the other players. And to help you yeah, so that's pretty much the main players. There are other players, specifically in China. Essentially, all the large Chinese companies have their own similar like AI development groups that are inside those companies. And then there are also like full AI labs also in China that are working on developing models. Um, so those are like the Quen series models. They produce Kimi K2 and DeepSeek, and there are these also like groups that are working on building foundation models. But really, these groups in China, and also one distinguishing feature is they tend to release their models as open source or open weights models. So it's not like, for example, where you have Chat GPT, where you only connect to OpenAI through their API, and they're logging everything that you're doing. They're logging what prompts you're sending, and they can run their own monitoring inside, and they can look at your conversations. Uh, One of the open weights providers, what they'll do instead is you can literally like uh, uh, download their model onto your own hardware or wherever you're going to serve it from, and serve it there, and then they have no access to what you're doing with their models. And those open model providers are sort of like 6 months behind. But so really the competition in terms of who's pushing deployment is happening, who's driving forward progress in artificial intelligence the most cutting edge models are the ones that are in the US. And it really centers around this competition between these very, very large companies now. And even the smallest of the companies that are competing now, like I think Anthropic or OpenAI are the smallest, their valuations are like generally assessed at like somewhere around $500 billion already. So those are considered the smaller players. So they're all like massively profitable. They are all like have massive valuations now. They've grown dramatically in size and scale. And as these companies have become more and more powerful, and they're fiercely competing with each other, there are all these sort of like factions are beginning to form. Like it does seem like Anthropic and Google are sort of more aligned with each other. They're more closely aligned, and it kind of makes sense because in a lot of ways, like their model development, their business models are sort of like they're compatible um, with each other. Whereas on the other hand, you have OpenAI is kind of like forming a faction a bit with they're closer to NVIDIA, the chip provider, and they're closer with Microsoft. And so you're having this sort of like these factions forming. And and there's competition, and this competition spilling over also into politics. So there is a whole like contentious fight that's going on behind the scenes. But what I wanted to talk about is specifically is how this competition is manifesting between these different groups as they're competing with each other, and how that's spilling over into politics. And the situation that really like shows where this sort of competition is what is happening right now with model usage for essentially the Department of War. So this is something we talked a little bit about last time, but the story has seen some developments since. And the story, I think, tells you all that you need to know about where policy is at right now. So essentially, the story is that all the large model companies were more or less coerced to sign contracts with the Department of War. So they sign contracts to allow the Department of War to use their models for their internal like R&D, where they're developing like based on the models supplied by those providers. And they don't really disclose exactly what they're working on, but I think that we can probably guess what they're working on. One possibility, and this is just speculation, but I think there's likely to be truth to this. Probably when these model providers are training their models, there's a step in post-training where, for example, they're training the models to not engage in hacking. They're training the models to not engage in cyber offense. And probably what's happening is they're saving the weights of the model before this training, before they do the actual before they add those safeguards to prevent people from using their models for like cyber attacks. And they probably take this model and serve it. So this model that hasn't been trained not to do this, and they serve it for example, the Department of War. So they can take this model, they can fine tune it to make it especially good at cyber attacks, and then you have a superhuman hacker. Essentially, that's like the idea. So that's probably one application that I'm certain they're working on right now. But they don't really discuss the contours of this. So like another potential application would be to use models for security. So the idea would be for surveillance. So like the idea would be you have let's say you have a lot of the text information about different people, so you can have their text messages, you can have transcripts of their phone calls, maybe, I don't know, emails, whatever large corpuses of text that you have accumulated about different people, about everyone, possibly. You can have your models go through and essentially like create a profile on everyone. And models are like getting good enough now at like acting as judges that you can probably even use them as for like classifiers. Like you can use them to classify individuals into different buckets, so you can see, okay, who might be like like politically suspect, who might be like whatever criteria the government would want to label people as. So that's a potential application. Or you can use models in actual for like autonomous weapon systems. Like I remember this video. I will try to find it and link it in the description here. But essentially, this guy had created this essentially like toy gun, and he put up a bunch of targets that were just like balloons on a wall, and the balloons were like different colors, and then he connected up ChatGPT in a way so that he could tell ChatGPT to shoot the blue balloons, and then it would control. It would like interact with the hardware, how he set up of the actual gun, so that it would move the gun around and shoot at the blue balloons. So that right there, you can imagine. And that was like an old video too. So models have improved dramatically since then. So you could definitely adapt these models and use them in autonomous weapons. So that's definitely being worked on. But so the Department of War was putting pressure on all these companies to give them access to their models completely so that they can do whatever they want with them. And the only company that kind of resisted was Anthropic. And Anthropic was actually agreeing that they would sign the contract with the Department of War, and they actually signed like a $200 million contract. So it's a lot of money, but it's about 1/1000th of like Anthropic's valuation. So it's a large amount of money, but not like massive. But they signed this contract with the Department of War. But what they refused to sign was essentially a statement that would say that the Department of War had full access to use their models however they see fit. So Anthropic was like, no, we can't allow you to use them however you see fit. There are only two things that we say you can't use our models for, and that's mass surveillance and autonomous weapons. Like, you can use them for anything else. If you want to make a super hacker, that's fine, but just don't use them for surveillance and for autonomous weapons. And and the Department of War reacted very angrily. So Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, I guess, Secretary of War, he was going after like Anthropic, and he was threatening to cancel the contract. And not only that, but he was threatening to put Anthropic on like a particular list. And if they put Anthropic on this list, then any company that deals with the government in any way, or I can't remember if it was the government as a whole or specifically the Department of War, can't do business with Anthropic. So obviously this is like would be a disaster for Anthropic. Their whole business model is to sell their product, their models, their capable like models, Claude Code, to businesses. That's their whole model. And you have a lot of businesses that deal directly with the government. Banking would fall under that. Pharmaceutical companies, generally there's like relationships with the government. They're getting like grants or whatever. So it's huge swaths of the economy wouldn't be able to do business with Anthropic. So essentially what they were threatening Anthropic with is destruction. Like they were threatening the source of the revenue. So there's massive coercion being put on Anthropic to allow the Department of War to essentially remove all the safeguards on their models so that they can serve it to the Department of War so that they can use it however they see fit. So now I wanted to actually like stop here and talk about something else. And it shows you like the two pictures of what's going on, like the world of the idealists versus the real world that we live in. So now you see the real world that we live in. It's a world where the Department of War will literally like twist the arms of any company that puts any sort of resistance in the name of security to using these models in weapons that are meant to hurt people, to use them for cyber attacks, to use them. Hopefully, no one's working on this, but I can imagine that they can be used to like help research biological weapons. Like maybe you have a very unrestricted version of the model, and if there are people in the government that are working on like bioweapons, maybe you use a very unrestricted version of the model to assist with that. So this is that real world that we live in. And then you read Dario Amodei. He published like an essay. I haven't had a chance to talk about this, and I think this needs to be discussed in another episode because it's a long story. But he published this other essay called The Adolescence of Technology. And this was supposed to be like the second part. The first long essay that he published was Machines of Love and Grace, which was supposed to be about all the benefits that AI can potentially have. And The Adolescence of Technology is about all the potential dangers that this is him warning the world about what can happen. And there are actually a lot of things in there that I thought were really good and that I really liked and I agreed with. I disagreed with some of the things that he was saying, and we can have a much longer or another like a video to discuss exactly what I disagreed with. But what I wanted to talk about today is his whole idea is that we don't see at the moment enough dangerous signs to convince him personally to stop. So he was essentially saying that as of right now, we're not in the doomsday scenario yet where we need to like burn it all down and like engage in extreme like political actions to restrict the development of this technology. He's like, yes, we see there are maybe some arguments to say, okay, this might end up bad, and he acknowledges that this is like a legitimate position, and he subscribes to it, that this could end up very, very poorly. These models are difficult to control. But he doesn't see a threat, an immediate threat that would cause him to say, let's stop. Instead, he thinks that we should proceed forward with caution. Some minimal, maybe legislation or regulation around transparency, and some just like common sense things, like maybe you have some off switch, so that if anything begins to go wrong, there is some easy way or protocol, some procedure that is like in place to be able to shut things down. Those are the sorts of policies that he wants. Something that won't slow down development, but that will, or maybe if we are going to slow down a little bit, it would be like requiring some like testing, having some tests that are mandated by law, required by law, before model release, stuff like that. And he thinks that we should start with this, and then in the future, if we see increasing signs that things are going poorly, then we can slow down and stop. So this is the world of the idealist, that I am the responsible person, and yes, these models are kind of hard to control. Yes, they're like potentially dangerous. Yes, they've shown some behavior that's that's, you know, very threatening and not great. Of course, all the other companies do that too. It's not just Anthropic. It's not just us. We just test for it. We're the good guys. Okay. All right, Dario. Like, yes, all of that, but that we are we are the responsible people, and we will continue development. And then when we think it's it's dangerous in the future, if if it's clear that the picture is very dark, then we will be able to stop, and we'll slow down, and we'll make sure we get everyone together at this future point where like everyone's going to come together, and we're all going to proceed very carefully, because obviously the future of humanity is at stake. So now, what Dario though cannot understand is that as soon as these models become seriously powerful, like as soon as the models are so powerful that they can affect, you know, like the fate of nations, there is 0% chance that he will be in charge. There is 0% chance that he will be the one that is setting the course. And we are already seeing this. What authority does Dario, as the CEO of Anthropic, have over this situation with the Department of War? They essentially called his bluff. They told him, you have to sign this document and let us use your models however we want to, and throw all your safety stuff, all this wishy-washy safety stuff out the window, because this is for national security. And what, are you not a patriot? And then when Dario says tries to mount any sort of resistance, he's hammered in public, and then he's threatened to essentially they're going to cripple his entire company if he doesn't comply. Like, you see the power imbalance. It's crazy. And for Dario, for his position, to think that he will be able to stop in this future point when the models are even more powerful, when there's even more of an incentive for governments to use these models for I don't know, defense applications. He thinks that at that point, he will really be able to stop this train that is moving forward. I don't think he will be able to stop. So your policy has to fit the world that you live in. And obviously, the world that we live in, this process, if indeed the models begin to show, if Dario himself begins to recognize that things are more and more dangerous, he won't be able to stop the train. And so you have to factor that in when you're planning your strategy about how to proceed. And I feel like he hasn't done that. He still is in some ways, and you can see him, he's beginning to realize this. Like, it's kind of funny because you see his older interviews, and it's kind of sad, but like his older interviews, he's so like upbeat, and it's clear like he is an idealist. He's like, and he is very lovable as a person, like in his older interviews and stuff. And you can just like see him as he gets older, and like he's now in charge of Anthropic, and he's facing all these like political pressures and whatever. And you can see how it's wearing on him. Like, he's like, he like has these like episodes during interviews where he kind of like loses it and like starts going off about like how everyone is motivated just by the profit motive, and that everyone's accusing him of bad intentions, where all he wants is just like a good future for humanity, and he's just like shocked by the short-sightedness of everyone. But this is the real world, and your strategy has to work in the real world. So anyways, it's a developing situation, but yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, and if I'm very confident that if we adopt Dario's strategy, and if this begins to go poorly, as I think it will, and I mean, Dario might disagree, on the prior, on like the probabilities that things will go badly. But let's say that things do go badly. I don't think we'll be able to stop at that point. The forces that will push this forward are too strong. And so that has to be factored into the policy. Anyways, I wanted to finish by one other thing that shows you exactly what is driving all of this forward. So we said that there's this sort of like partnership between NVIDIA and OpenAI. So OpenAI, their official, I guess, policy is that they are resistant to any sort of regulation. And their argument is that if we regulate AI development in any way, then all we're doing is we are essentially giving China the advantage. If we regulate American companies that are developing artificial intelligence, then we're giving China an opening to catch up to American companies or to surpass them, to win the AI race. This is the central argument that they use to argue against regulation. And then you have NVIDIA, which is actually working very closely with OpenAI. And NVIDIA, they are supporting and pushing policy to reduce the restrictions on selling their chips to China. So from the Biden era, you had pretty stringent restrictions on what type of chips NVIDIA can sell to China. And so the idea was to try to hamstring their AI industry by preventing them from amassing the kinds of chips that you can use to run that have the greatest amount of compute, that are most optimized for training, for inference, for models. And so the idea was that if you can stop selling these chips to China, that you would reduce their AI industry, that you would kill it in the cradle. I forget the expression. That's the idea. Pretty violent, but it's okay. So, but they want to reduce this because they can make more money if they can sell their chips to China. And now the policy of the government is they are against all regulation, AI regulation, because they want to compete and win against China. And also they're for reducing the reducing the restrictions on NVIDIA selling chips to China. So I have a question. How in the world is this a coherent policy? How does that make any sense? How are you simultaneously against all regulation on AI because you're afraid that China will catch up, and also reducing the barrier to selling advanced chips to China that they would use to accelerate their AI research and to build up their AI industry? How can you be for both of those positions? And I contend that there's only one potential motivation that can explain having those two policies in place. And obviously, that motivation is short-term profit. Unfortunately, remarkably, I think what is driving this is literally short-term profit. Like you think of OpenAI. This company has been essentially like 10xing their valuation every year on year. They're just 10x, 10x, 10x. It's crazy. They're almost at $1 trillion now. And they're not publicly traded. So how do you actually buy stock in OpenAI? Well, they have fundraising. They'll have fundraising, and people are invited to essentially more or less like bid on buying shares in OpenAI. And those people that have shares on OpenAI, which generally are the well-connected and rich to begin with, these investors, these people have been 10xing their money for the last few years. Year on year, 10x. And believe it or not, I really do think that these individuals are the ones that are pushing the policies of the government, either directly or indirectly, either because persons in the administration themselves are making a lot of money, or maybe they're all like one social strata, and they like, you have, for example, you can imagine like a hedge fund manager. Their job depends on returns for their clients, and they tend to be very well connected. And so they literally will call someone in the administration and ask for these policies, because all they care about is they want that 100% growth for their hedge fund for next year. And they're massively invested in OpenAI and NVIDIA. So they are pushing for policies that maximize short-term profit. We want no restrictions on NVIDIA selling chips to China, because that makes NVIDIA a lot of money, and then their stock value goes up significantly. And we want no AI regulation whatsoever, so that OpenAI can race forward with products with more advanced models, and so their valuation can continue to inflate as well. And that's literally the reasoning. That's literally what's driving the train, which is insane. Insane. But unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. It's like cartoonish levels of greed. Like, it's crazy. It is almost as if humanity's vices are leading us blind to extinction. Like, it's almost like all these vices that we have, like for greed, and like pride, and like impulsiveness, and a desire for comfort, for immediate comfort too. All of those are working, and our short-sightedness, all of those are like working hand in hand to drive humanity off a cliff. And it's not even just that we're like driving off a cliff. It's not even that we're like falling off a cliff. We are running as fast as possible off a cliff. It's any sort of like, it's in so many ways we're adopting the worst possible action consistently. Like already the amounts of safeguards that were being put on models are insufficient to actually like make these models behave properly. Like, what we should be doing is the exact opposite of what we are doing. We should be increasing the amount of testing that we're doing. We should be increasing the amount of safeguards that are being placed on these models as they advance more and more. But we're moving exactly the opposite direction. Enormous pressure is being brought to bear for these companies to service models that have no safeguards at all. That's a world that I don't think even the most doomerish person imaginable, like 5 years ago or 4 years ago about AI doom, would have possibly imagined that this is the kind of future that we'd be headed towards. A future where there's enormous political pressure the other way to totally unleash the models, to totally remove safeguards, to literally fine-tune the models to harm people and spy on people. That's insane. And engage in like cyber attacks. That's an insane future, and yet it is the future that we're living in. It's crazy. But anyways, I'll stop here because I think I've already been going on for quite a while. But thank you very much for listening, and don't forget, winter's coming. All right, take care.